Thank you. Thank you. So, yes, I am Kirsty Duxbury. I'm a senior associate at Anthony Collins Solicitors. I work within the charity governance team and specialise in ecclesiastical law. So, I am also the diocesan registrar for the Diocese of Sheffield and registrar for the Diocese of Worcester and deputy registrar for the Diocese of Blackburn. So, yes, quite busy in that role.
Very busy indeed, yes. So this afternoon we invited you to see if you could talk to us a little bit about licenses within the Church of England, but specifically clergy licenses. What do people refer to when they're talking about clergy licenses? What do they actually mean legally?
So it's an important starting point because the word license is used in a number of different contexts within the Church of England. When I was first approached for this session, it was, can you do a session on licenses? And we quickly needed to clarify what we were going to cover in that 15-minute slot. So we see licenses relating to buildings used for public worship, marriage law, lay ministry and clergy ministry. But when most people within diocesan life refer to clergy licenses, they are usually referring to the bishop's lawful authorisation for ministry within the diocese. At the centre of the Church of England structure is episcopal ministry. The diocesan bishop is the ordinary of the diocese, and ministry is exercised within that episcopal and canonical framework. So Canon C8 is particularly important because it makes clear that nobody may officiate as a minister unless lawfully authorised. Ordination alone is therefore not enough. Ordination gives a priest or deacon the capacity to minister, but authority to exercise ministry in a particular place or role comes through lawful authorisation. That authority may arise through institution or collation to a benefice, through a licence granted by the bishop, or through permission to officiate. Those distinctions matter because they affect status, responsibilities, security of tenure, and the legal framework within which ministry is exercised. Even where ministry is authorised by the bishop, ministry within a parish or benefice is shaped by the cure of souls attached to the benefice and exercised by the incumbent. So authority within the Church of England is episcopal in structure, but also exercised locally through ecclesiastical office and cure of souls.
Okay, thank you. In terms, you've already mentioned Canon C8. Could you tell us a little more about the canons and licenses, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. So the canons provide part of the legal framework for ministry within the Church of England, and they also sit alongside measures, regulations, and other ecclesiastical legislation. So in the context of licenses, several canons are particularly relevant. So we've mentioned Canon C8, which deals with the lawful authority to officiate. Canon C12 is particularly important for licenses, as that provides that a license granted by the bishop under his hand and seal to any minister to serve within the diocese shall be in the form set out within that canon. So those forms within Canon C12 include a general license to preach or otherwise to minister in any parish or ecclesiastical district, a license to perform a particular office, a license connected with a mission initiative endorsed by a bishop's mission order, and a license to perform offices and services for the furtherance of work and mission of religious community. Canon C12 also contains an important safeguard where a minister has come from another diocese. In that case, the bishop should not grant a license unless the minister first shows letters of orders or other sufficient evidence of ordination and brings testimony from the bishop of the diocese from which the minister has come as to the minister's honesty, ability, and conformity to the doctrine, discipline, and worship of the Church of England. The canons also deal with lay licenses. So canons E4 to 6 govern the admission and licensing of licensed lay ministers, formerly known as readers, and canons E7 to 8 concerns lay workers and their requirements for licensing. So together these canons help ensure that ministry is exercised in an ordered, lawful and coherent way within the life of the church.
Thank you. As we were talking about before we started, I do find the different types of clergy office and the different types of license quite confusing. So could you talk us through some of the basics on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So broadly speaking, there are three main categories. So the first being benefice clergy, so incumbents such as rectors and vicars. Strictly speaking, these clergy are not licensed. Instead, they are admitted to office through institution or collation and then induction to the benefice. The incumbent holds ecclesiastical office within the benefice, and authority to officiate derives from that office rather than a separate licence. And the framework for appointment of an incumbent is governed principally through the Patronage Benefice Measure 1986. The second category is unbeneficed clergy, and this is where authority is granted directly by the diocesan bishop through a licence. This is often the position for assistant curates, team vicars, priest in charge, chaplains, and other non-beneficed clergy roles. The licence normally defines the scope and extent of ministry, including the parish, benefice, or role within which ministry is exercised. One practical point which often arises under this second category concerns titles. Assistant curates are ordinarily described legally as assistant curates of the relevant parish or benefice. Where a diocese wishes to use an alternative title for an assistant curate role, Section 99 of the Mission and Pastoral Measure 2011 may become relevant. In many dioceses, there is a desire for clergy who are legally licensed as assistant curates to use alternative working titles, such as associate priest or associate minister, and sometimes associate vicar. This is commonly achieved through the bishop exercising powers under Section 99 of the Mission and Pastoral Measure to determine the style or designation by which the office holder is known. So essentially, they are still an assistant curate, but there can be many titles for that role. In practice, dioceses will usually seek registry advice before approving a proposed title to ensure that it doesn't create confusion or inadvertently imply incumbent status. Care is particularly needed with titles such as associate vicar or associate rector, as those terms can suggest a status closer to that of an incumbent office holder. It's also helpful to distinguish those alternative titles from the office of priest in charge. So unlike titles such as associate priest or associate minister, a priest in charge holds a separate ecclesiastical office recognised in law and is not an assistant curate using a different style or designation. A priest in charge is commonly appointed where presentation to a benefice has been suspended under the Mission and Pastoral Measure. Rather than being instituted and inducted as an incumbent, the office holder is licensed by the bishop to exercise ministry within that benefice. So although a priest in charge will ordinarily exercise the cure of souls and undertake many of the same practical and pastoral responsibilities as an incumbent, they do not hold the benefice in the same legal manner. And for these training purposes, the useful distinction is that a priest in charge exercises ministry within a benefice, but remains part of the licensed non-benefice category rather than being benefice clergy.
Thank you. So that helps with the names. Do the licenses also vary in terms of the scope of the role that's being exercised?
Yes, and that's another important practical distinction. Some licenses are limited to ministry within a particular parish, benefice, or role, whereas others may authorise ministry more broadly across a diocese. In practice, the wording of the licence becomes very important as it defines the extent of authority being granted and the context within which ministry may lawfully be exercised. Questions can also arise where ministry crosses diocesan boundaries. As a general principle, clergy require authority from the diocesan bishop within whose diocese ministry is being exercised. A licence granted in one diocese does not automatically authorise ministry in another. One example that we come across in the registry can arise in chaplaincy ministry under the Extra Parochial Ministry Measure 1967. Chaplains may sometimes minister across diocesan boundaries and may therefore require authority from more than one diocesan bishop, depending on the nature and geography of the ministry being exercised. For example, within an NHS trust that may straddle boundaries of dioceses. Importantly, chaplaincy ministry also highlights that not all authorised ministry is exercised through ecclesiastical office. Chaplains are frequently employees rather than office holders, but still require appropriate episcopal authority in order to lawfully minister.
Thank you. So that's good so far, but how about permission to officiate? That's another term that I'm never quite sure of.
Yes, so that's the third category. Permission to officiate, often referred to as PTO. This is generally granted by the diocesan bishop and permits ministry on a more limited and discretionary basis. So PTO is commonly used for retired clergy or clergy whose principal role lies elsewhere. Importantly, permission to officiate is not the same as holding ecclesiastical office. It permits ministry, but usually without the legal status or responsibilities attached to beneficed or licensed clergy.
Thank you. And then when you're preparing a license, what sort of practical things need to be completed beforehand? What sort of legal formalities are there?
Yes, so in practice, the grant of a license is not simply an informal administrative step. Canon C12 itself refers to licensing under seal, so there's a document with a seal. The license will ordinarily be issued under the bishop's hand and seal, and diocesan registries will usually oversee the preparation and sealing of the license and oversee that the completion of the relevant legal formalities take place. So before licensing, clergy will commonly need to take or will need to take the oath of allegiance and the oath of canonical obedience and make the declaration of assent, and that's in accordance with the canons. The precise timing can vary in practice, but those oaths and declarations should be completed before the minister is licensed so that the authority to minister is properly regularised within the diocese.
Thank you. And then two last quick questions before we open up to wider questions. First of all, could you tell us about the legal nature of clergy office and common tenure, first of all?
Yes, yeah, which is an incredibly complex topic. So briefly, clergy generally hold ecclesiastical office rather than serving as employees in the ordinary contractual sense. And that distinction is important because the legal relationship is principally governed through ecclesiastical law, including the canons, measures, and regulations, rather than purely through employment law principles. So most clergy now hold office under common tenure introduced through the Ecclesiastical Office's Terms of Service, Measure 2009, and the associated regulations. Common tenure introduced a more structured framework dealing with matters such as terms of service, ministerial development review, grievance procedures, capability processes, and removal procedures. It's important to note that common tenure did not turn clergy into employees. Clergy generally remain office holders exercising ministry under ecclesiastical law with episcopal authority.
Thank you. Now, I was going to ask one more question, but I think I'm going to stop the recording there and